Oh, hey, how's it going? It's David. I'm back. I wanted to do something today that I don't normally do, but I was researching kind of the history of hacking and the impact it's had, and I found this white paper from the computer science department at University of Washington. So I just thought I would read it, and I was reading it to myself, so I thought I might as well stream it or record it, and if anyone is interested, they would be able to listen along if you like my voice. If not, sorry, I can only do this voice. But anyways, this is the history and impact of hacking, a final paper from the history of computer. Unfortunately, I was unable to find the actual authors of this, but it looked really good, so I wanted to share it. So, introduction by everyone. The hacking culture began in the 1960s and the 1970s as an intellectual movement, exploring the unknown, documenting the arcane, and doing what others cannot. Many hacking subcultures developed independently and in parallel at various universities throughout the United States: Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, UC Berkeley, and many others. The completion of the ARPANET linked these campuses, and they were able to share their collective experiences, their knowledge, humor, and skills. Today, they formed the first hacking culture. Many hackers began as expert programmers, programming gurus like Richard Stallman, founder of the free software movement, and Linus Torvalds, the creator of the Linux kernel. These programmers were able to found new loosely connected organizations that would push the boundaries of accepted software engineering and also technology. These figures served to popularize the efforts of hacking to society, increasingly focused on computing. In the realm of computer security, with the advent of ubiquitous networking, a distinction began to form between the two groups, the so-called black hat and white hat hackers. Both maintain a connection to the hacker ethic, that's hacker, hacker ethic, but focus on different aspects and interpretations. The black hat culture, known for flouting authority and embracing anarchy, committing acts of mischief and malice, and knowingly breaking and entering secured systems. These are the hackers most often seen in the news and popular culture. The white hats, the ethical hackers, focus on other aspects of the hacker ethic. They seek to understand, to satiate curiosity, and to inform. A compelling aspect of the history of hackers lies in the history of the word itself. To fully understand how and why these often mutually disparate groups happen to be called the same name, we have to examine how the computer security definition sprang from its common English definition and how it evolved to identify these different communities. While it is intractable to provide even a definite definition of hacker due to the constant merging and fracturing of the English language, we will at the very least attempt to provide a chronicle of the word's new definitions from their birth to their entry into the standard American English. So the word hacker by Carmelo Quintana. To a computer science metaphor, the word hacker acts as a pointer to three different groups of people: the expert programmers, the black hats, and the white hats. This section will examine in detail the pointer itself. Detailed examinations of the dereference groups will take place later in the paper. Survey of common definitions. We must briefly describe and define each of the three hacker groups in order to be able to flesh out the discussion properly. Many people see hackers as primarily referring to the people who are the most technically proficient in a certain subject. We examine a subset of this group, the expert programmers. A separate set of hackers are the black hats. The group primarily uses their skills with computers to attack computer systems and to perform assorted malicious acts on their victims. This is the primary definition of hacker in the modern day. The white hats are the last set of hackers. They are very similar to the black hats, except they intend no malice, and indeed may go far out of their way to prevent harm from coming to their hosts. The groups share a few common traits between them. For example, all three groups are generally thought to possess skills superior to those of their peers. In the case of the expert programmers, this superior skill is a defining characteristic. Indeed, if they did not possess superior skill and claimed to be a hacker, they would simply be a poser. Additionally, the two other groups are expected to have superior skill because if they did not, they would easily be captured. Many of the perceptions of the groups overlap as well. This will be analyzed later. Outside of the few commonalities, the groups are very different. While the infiltration of foreign computer systems is a requirement for black and white hats, it is irrelevant to the expert programmer. Also, white and black hats are obviously opposites. The primary definition of hacker, according to m-w.com, not counting the fruitless one that hacks, is a person who is inexperienced or unskilled in a particular activity. It is remarkable that a word with this meaning would eventually pick up definition number 3, an expert at programming and solving problems with a computer. A quick glean from the definitions of the verb hack yields to cut or sever with repeated irregular or unskillful blows, to clear or make by as if by cutting away vegetation, and eventually to manage successfully. Etymologically, the word is derived from the Old English word for hack, hackian. What we get from all this is the word originally meant people who chop badly and generalized from there. At first glance, it may seem that our computer forefathers did not choose wisely when developing our vocabulary. To try and understand the logic behind this, we look at the first proto-use of the word in our context. Through an in-depth search online, we find that the original source is not surprisingly MIT, specifically the Tech Model Railroad Club. The first very documented semi-modern use of the word hack is found in the club's dictionary. The dictionary's original author keeps a copy of the original dictionary on his website. An article or project without constructive end, work undertaken on bad self-advice, an entropy booster, to produce or an attempt to produce a hack. We see here the missing link between old and new definitions. We can conjecture the missing details to ourselves. To the ancients, hack meant to chop badly. It then acquired the meaning of doing something repetitively bad. MIT TMRC then defines it as doing something railroady and useless. It then becomes doing something technical and useless. At this point, hackers are those who do something technical for no reason, and in other words, for fun. From here, it is a small jump to expert technical person. Thus, this is the first documented reference in our expert programmer definition. Programmer being used loosely in this case. Evolution. Having revealed the birth of the modern definition of hacker, we have to examine the word moved from obscure model railroad jargon to mainstream American English. To do this, Professor Moore suggests performing an experiment to trace the evolution of the word in a LexisNexis search. References for hacker were for cab drivers and golf until July 2, 1981. And the Canadian newspaper Globe and Mail reported on a San Francisco-based gang known as the System Hackers. The article that I'm assuming states that unlisted activities of the gang and other freaks and hackers, as they are known, have added a new item to North American crowded police files: juvenile computer criminals. This is obviously also the first mainstream reference for the black hat game of hackers, according to LexisNexis. The first news transcript that contained the word was on December 4th, 1984, from Ted Koppel on ABC's World News Tonight. He said there has been a lot of stories recently about the computer hackers, high-tech experts who use their personal computers to break into big computer systems. This is clearly a never reference to the black hats. However, upon further web searching, particularly Google News archive search, we came upon Time magazine article from September 5th, 1977. It read, "Some 500 retail outlets have opened in the past couple of years to sell and service microcomputers, and serve as hangouts for the growing legions of home computer nuts, or hackers as they call themselves." This is the first mainstream reference for the expert programmer definition. However, while the article, which had the popularity of low-cost microcomputers, mentions that the users called themselves hackers, the article itself preferred to use the term nuts and addicts. It is then doubtful that this article helped spur usage of the term in the mainstream. On a side note, it is surprising that LexisNexis did not find this source, but Google did. Further searching found the first documented use in journalism. MIT's school newspaper, The Tech, featured an article in its November 20th, 1963 issue entitled, "Services Curtailed, Telephone Hackers Active." The article describes what would later be known as phreaking and the consequences for the university. A search of Usenet archives found the first documented use of the word hacker. Kenneth Peter, alias G. Gandalf, is quoted as saying on May 6, 1981, "The commentary to the hacker papers, Psychology Today, August 80th, I'm assuming that's Article 80th, Wisenbaum, 1976, and all others observe that many people appear to use computer interactions as a substitute for human interactions." The post was rebutted a statement about the large number of gays in computer science. The hacker papers to which the post refers is claimed to be a BBS, I'm assuming that's British Broadcast System, service, thread regarding the overuse of computers, in which there was annotated by a psychologist. We could find no reliable original copy of the hacker papers. The second hacker post, timestamped on May 10th, 1981, and written by Jonathan Allen Solomon, is the first use on Usenet to mention hackers that is not a reference to a title. I tried that in my fraternity house. I started using the hacker buzzwords around all the people. Those like foo, blech, barf, but also some of the top 10 system calls, exit, init, and machine instructions, skippa, LSH. No reference could be found to hackers as exclusively the white hat group. Perception. Having established the history of the word hacker to the present day, we will lastly examine in detail the perceptions and the connotations that the word has for people today. To provide a complete picture of the different groups' perceptions of the word, we need to not only analyze the views of the public towards hacker, but also the views of each individual group toward the word hacker. Keep in mind that this section is not an analysis of perceptions of the individual groups, but only the connotations of the word. Public perceptions. To mainstream America, a hacker is black hat. Since the mainstream adoption of the word in the early 1980s, the word hacker was used to refer to black hats to what seems like the near exclusion of the other two definitions. As shown earlier, the word entered the mainstream in reference to computer vandals, and that this is the definition that is kept to this day. In original use, an expert programmer has cropped up on occasion, notably in the movie Jurassic Park, released in 1993. When Lex, the computer expert, tells his brother she's a hacker, her brother responds, "That's what I said, you're a nerd. They don't call you people hackers anymore. They call you people nerds." This is clearly not a reference to a black hat. Insider perceptions. Unfortunately, this general perception by the mainstream that a hacker is a black hat has had negative consequences for the other two groups. Some of the expert groups, who were originally users of the word, choose to no longer use the term due to the negative connotations, preferring instead other terms such as geek or guru, depending on the context. Black hats generally use the term hacker and is not seen a word to be avoided. White hats prefer not to use the word hacker as they wish to distance themselves as much as possible from black hats, preferring to use the term white hat itself. Even within the smaller technology community, the word hacker generally means black hat. There is a significant following who strangely believe that the word hacker should exclusively mean expert programmer and prefer that the original MIT jargon for black hat, cracker, to be used instead. To those outside this group, the word cracker is oftentimes met with derision and a flame war will occasionally ensure. The proponents of cracker argue that the community must strive to keep the word's definition as closely as the original meaning as possible. They point out that the word is heavily overloaded and the lore of its original definition may have been lost. The detractors of cracker argue that those who have used the word out of touch and simply refuse to accept what has already been de facto settled, that the word hacker means black hat. This section will conclude the brief summary of how each group has contributed to the definition of hacker. The original group of experts, of course, coined the phrase and lent it to its original meaning. Black hat, many of whom were experts, used the word to describe themselves, of using it as part of their hacker gang name. The mainstream media seized upon this, and it became widely and nearly universal accepted definition. White hats have not made any attempt to modify the definition of the word, instead clearly delineating themselves from their black hat counterparts by promoting terms such as white hat and black hat. Timeline of the word hack. Circa AD 500, an Old English word for hack, hacking, is used. October 14th, 1066. The Battle of Hastings is won. With the arrival of the Norman conquerors, Old English transforms into Middle English. Hackian becomes Hackin. Circa AD 1470. The introduction of the printing press standardizes English literature or language. Middle English becomes Modern English. Hackin becomes Hack. Circa June 1959, Peter R. Sampson of the Tech Model Railroad Club of MIT publishes an abridged dictionary of the TRMC language. It contains the first verifiable modern source of the word hacker. November 20th, 1963, MIT's newspaper, The Tech, publishes the first documented use of hacker in journalism. September 5th, 1977, Time magazine publishes the first documented use of the word hacker in mainstream press. August 1st, 1980, Psychological Today publishes the Hacker Papers. May 6, 1981, possibly the first surviving documented Usenet post of the word hacker. July 2nd, 1981, the first documented use in a newspaper of the word hacker. December 4th, 1984, the word hacker is documented to be spoken for the first time on television by Ted Koppel. Expert Programmer by Vikas Ravjanchi. I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce that. Hacker as an expert programmer. As the reader is well aware by now, the term hacker is overloaded. One common use of the word is to refer to individuals who are experts in a technology field who push the technology beyond what others perceive as possible. The impact on society. Hackers in this context have a very measurable impact to society. If we treat the term hacker to refer to a person that pushes technology beyond perceived norms at the time, we can see several different fields in computing to which they have made measurable impact. Personal computing machines. Steve Wozniak is almost universally accredited by upbringing the affordable PC to the masses. Whilst the precursors of technology were already developed at PARC, it took a hacker with detailed knowledge of the hardware components to melt together a PC from disparate parts at an affordable price. Gaming. Hackers have been pushing the limits of gaming for decades. Probably the most famous hacker in this area is John Carmack. Carmack pioneered several technologies to push graphical capabilities of the PC beyond what is conventionally possible. Internet. Infrastructure. Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web. Web 2.0. Ajax, the foundation of Web 2.0, is often regarded as a huge hack by professional software developers. Often the constructs will bend the rules to work around limitations in the infrastructure. Open source. Linus Torvalds himself is often regarded as a hacker. The stereotypical view of hacker is simply an expert programmer that lacks engineering discipline and the focus required by large team projects. However, most of the innovations listed above require a sustained amount of effort. Famous hackers. Some people may argue that based on impact, could we not say any successful technologist is a hacker? To test this, and to be able to rank famous hackers quantitatively on an experiment was conducted. The methodology was as follows. A base list of hackers was obtained from Wikipedia entry on hackers. For each entry in this base list, 2 Google searches were done. The first one contained the hacker's name. The second search contained the hacker's name as well as the term hacker. The number of matches for each search were recorded. The results were analyzed to see the relative number of hits as well as the rate at which a particular hacker's name appeared with the term hacker. These were compared against well-known people in the technology industry. I'm not going to read that off, but I will link this article if you wish to read it yourself. While there are all flaws with this methodology, it does provide some interesting insight. The relative popularity is an indicator of the relative interest on the internet. The hacker quotient is an indicator for how many people consider the person to be a hacker. Comparing hacker quotients to other well-known successful technology personalities, Bill Gates shows up with a hacker quotient of 0.08. Michael Dell shows up with 0.05. This is definitely towards the bottom of all hackers listed above. It would seem that having impact by itself is not enough to be considered a hacker. A very strong, interesting result is that both of the top hacker in terms of popularity and hacker quotient are strongly affiliated with the open source movement. Richard Stallman founded both the Free Software Movement and the Free Software Foundation. Linus Torvalds initiated development of the Linux kernel. Another interesting insight is that the list is predominantly populated by software hackers, and only 2 hardware hackers are made to see in the list: Steve Wozniak and Richard Greenblatt. Where did all the hardware hackers go? As previously noted, in today's computing culture, hackers seem to be focused primarily in the software arena. Looking at the major hardware hackers, one tends to stand out. Most of them did the work that made them famous in the 1960s and 1970s. After this point, there's a sharp drop-off in superstar hardware hackers. There are several plausible explanations for this. The barriers for entry for building computing machines were often growing rapidly as economies of scale became more important. Software is a largely undeveloped field that is only beginning to realize its full potential. Hardware had become complex enough that a single individual could not make measurable impact. Likely is a combination of these factors that led to a decline in innovations that hackers were making in the hardware arena. Why are the top hackers today affiliated with open source? Looking at the top hackers based on the previous section, it should be clearly evident that many are strongly affiliated with the open source movement. After looking through the list and scrutinizing it in more detail, the open source connection starts to become stronger. A primary example of a prominent hacker having strong open source leanings is Tim Berners-Lee, who made his idea about the World Wide Web freely available. While not directly contributing code to an open source project, he laid the foundations for what was most arguably to become one of the great revolutions in computing. Another hacker, John Carmack, a very prominent video game designer, is probably the most vocal advocate of open source. He also strongly opinionated with regards to patents. John Carmack. I'm proud that there is a relatively dearth of patent applications for the video game industry, especially considering how technology dependent the video game industry is, and given its size in terms of annual sales. Before issuing condemnation, I try to think hard about it from their point of view. The laws of the land set the rules of the game, and the lawyers are deeply confused at why some of us aren't using the tools that the game gave us. Patents are usually discussed in the context of someone stealing an idea from the long-suffering lone inventor that devoted his life to creating one brilliant idea. Blah, blah, blah. That's kind of funny. But in the majority of cases in software, patents often affect independent invention. Get a dozen sharp programmers together, give them all a hard problem to work on, and a bunch of them will come up with solutions that would probably be patentable, and be similar enough that the first programmer to file the patent could sue the others for patent infringement. Why should society reward that? What benefit does it bring? It doesn't bring more, better, cheaper products to market. Those all come from competition, not arbitrary monopolies. The programmer that filed the patent didn't work any harder because a patent might be available. Solving the problem was his job, and he had to do it anyways. Getting a patent is uncorrelated to any positive attributes and just serves to allow either money or wasted effort to be extorted from generally unsuspecting and innocent people or companies. Yes, it is a legal tool that may help you against your competitors, but I'll have no part of it. It's basically mugging somebody. I could waste hours going on about this. I really need to write a position paper someday that I can cut and paste when this topic comes up. John Carmack. The obvious questions arise. Why do hackers tend to have open source leanings? There are many possible explanations, and there is likely no single explanation that fits every individual. Analyzing the open letter by John Carmack above, it would be not unreasonable to assume that his motivator was simply not simply profit, as he clearly states that patents will help against your competitors, however, he will have no part of it. Looking at other hackers, the theme emerges again. A large majority of these hackers are not solely motivated by monetary rewards. Increasingly, the cause and effect might be reversed. Probably a more accurate statement would be that open source developers are more likely to be hackers rather than vice versa. The most likely reason for this is that the innovations that hackers make are not necessarily the best decisions to maximize the economic self-interest. Thus, there needs to be another motivator besides greed. What is the role of hackers in corporations? If hackers require motivators besides profit, is there any role for them in modern corporation? A lot of the more prominent hackers discussed so far are opposed to software patents and copyrights. However, their primary motivator is to push the state of the art in terms of technology. As many people know, certain fields of technology have become too capital intensive for small companies or groups to enter. For example, this includes CPU, GPU design, chip fabrication, etc. Companies in such fields may be able to successfully leverage the creative power of hackers. A good example of this is how Linus Torvalds spends a period of time working at Transmeta, a commercial chip company, working on cutting low-edge power chips. Some informal surveys were conducted around Microsoft. While there was evidence of Microsoft hiring both white and black hackers, I could not find any examples of expert programmer hackers. One possible reason is that hackers are often interested in pursuits that are not necessarily economically viable. This limits their compatibility with for-profit corporations. Another possibility is that Microsoft is often seen in an ideological light as opposed to the free software movement. Similar informal surveys were done at a smaller scale for several technology companies such as Amazon and Sun. The results were similar. Sorry. Black Hat by Sandra Lemon and Hanson Louis. History. Hacker culture began as multiple independent and parallel subcultures with many traits in common, placing a high value on the freedom of information, the freedom to discover, to understand, flouting of authority, and an eclectic sense of humor. Many trace the origins of the hacker subculture to the year 1961, when MIT first acquired the PDP-1 microcomputer. Hacker beginnings are entrenched deeply in academia, the desire to pursue knowledge unknown, to do things others cannot. The AI lab first described themselves as hackers after their tradition of playing elaborate pranks or hacks. The completion of ARPANET in the 1970s gave rise to a network culture of hackers able to share their experiences, knowledge, jargon, and humor. One of the earliest and most enduring legacies is that of the jargon file, created in 1973 at the Stanford AI Lab, SAIL, and went through many revisions in many campuses, including MIT, CMU, Yale, and many others. The jargon file is a massive collection of hacker slang and hacker humor. Many of the references and acronyms in the jargon file are still widely used today. Although hacking became as an intellectual pursuit, there became a growing divide. Those who hacked for the pursuit of knowledge and those who hacked with a malicious intent, which is to bring down systems of those they didn't like, to steal information and secrets that were being kept. This gave rise to the Black Hat movement. In fact, many lawful hackers prefer that the Black Hats be known as crackers rather than hackers in an attempt to distinguish themselves. It's possible to see the growth of the Black Hat community simply as a byproduct of a growing society. As any society grows past a certain limit, a dark side emerges. Black Hat hackers range from mildly irritated to the genuinely malicious. There are those that simply download and use tools or exploits. These are known as script kiddies. There are those that simply download and use tools or exploits. These are known as script kiddies, and are generally frowned upon as unskilled exploiters of known bugs. There are those who phish or commit acts of social engineering to seek out passwords, bank accounts, or credit numbers by posing as members of authority. In a similar vein, there are worm authors who write self-replicating programs that worm their way from computer to computer, network to network, creating an army of zombie machines, or simply disabling all machines that they encounter. And finally, there's another tier. Those are the elite hackers who have the skill, who make the discovery of these exploits and security lapses. These are the feared black hats, the ones who are rarely publicized, but yet do all and much more than the hackers widely known. A common tenet to all black hats that ties them together is that they knowingly commit whatever mischief or malice with the full intent of committing such acts. Early examples. One of the earliest examples of black hat hackers is the phone phreak who hacked for profit. The basic tool of the phone phreak was a frequency-generating blue box that hacked the phone system to permit the user free calls to anywhere for however long they wished. These were those who simply enjoyed the experience of phreaking. John Draper, known as his alias Captain Crunch, developed machines to seek out the limits of the phone networks. There were stories of him calling the payphone next to him and routing a call all the way across the world, from New York to London to Moscow, across from Pacific and back. Phone phreaks such as Mark Burnett or even Evan Doorbell would publish their phone trips as they explored the network and connected all phones across the United States. A sense of the exploration and discovery filled many of those early generation phone phreaks, and yet there were those involved in phreaking who created these blue box devices for use with organized crime, and would use this technology to make free phone calls for criminal purposes. The BBS era of the mid-1980s to early 1990s came, and along with it a massive spike in software privacy. Software privacy started early on. Those who wanted to trade software simply did so with media, via postmail or in person. The rise of the BBS era and the networked machines allowed people to trade in a much more prolific manner, especially those with the blue boxes for free, unlimited duration calls over which their software could be distributed. As software companies realized their software was being traded illegally, they began implementing security measures to cope with an unauthorized distribution. The security measures gave birth to the cracking hacker, or cracker, the black hat who broke the encryption or removed the protection so that software was once again free. These hackers knowingly removed commercial security measures for their personal gain, a defining characteristic of many black hats. The rise in software piracy created the Juarez scene, a massive network of software pirates dedicated to cracking, copying, and distributing the latest software releases. Modern examples and motivations. As we look across the more recent instances of hacking, we can also analyze the motivations behind those attacks and those who execute them. The best and most detailed examples of the modern hacking are those who hackers were eventually caught and tried for crimes. Luckily for us, the FBI publishes a list of the crimes on the internet, perhaps as their way of hitting hackers back on their playground. Currently, the FBI's website lists over 100 computer crime cases tried in the United States between 1999 and 2005. Only 3 were considered to be threats to public health or safety. This means that most of the computer crime occurring were for financial gain or other, more complex personal reasons. Nearly 1/4 of the cases were student, employees, or former employees taking advantage of the internal knowledge and using it for retaliation or financial gain. Several of the accused in these cases were known members of the underground hacking organizations. Their motivations must align with that society and culture generally associated with hackers: young, thrill seekers, anti-society, bold, and competitive. In most, if not all cases, the accused is a young male. Ethnicity is not available, but most accused hackers were United States citizens. A closer look to some of these cases can perhaps provide a better understanding of the underground hackers and their motives. In the case of the United States versus Lytle, March 11, 2005, the defendant, Robert Lytle, 21, pled guilty to hacking into government computers and defacing government websites with material illegally obtained through this hacking. Robert Lytle was the member of the hacking group known as the Deceptive Duo, who claims that their intent was to inform and warn the public and government of the vulnerabilities that existed. In fact, the group did leave their email address on the government website that they faced, insisting that they be contacted in order to assist the government with locking down all their systems. The meaning of the group's name, coupled with the defendant's previous encounter with law for defacing public websites and protest the recording industry's injunction on file sharing Napster, does provide some doubt into the innocence of his attack. Surely, he must be known for defacing a government website would draw attention and punishment in some form. Some would speculate the attention and fame, bragging rights, are more deserved than the attempt to warn the government of security failings. Lytle received 4 months in prison, 4 months of house arrest, and was ordered to repay over $70,000. Max Butler was prosecuted in 2000 for hacking into government systems. He was 28. His story is different because he was supposedly a white hat hacker and working with the FBI as an informant. The temptation must have been too great because he broke into thousands of government computers. On the surface, it looked as he was simply being helpful because he patched the flaw and allowed him in, effectively disallowing the other hackers in. Unfortunately for him, while there, he created a backdoor so that only he could return. Conspiracy theorists would say that there is much more to this case, but we're simply interested in his motivations of hacking. While serving his 18th month prison term, Butler gave a telephone interview and attributed his actions to a combination of peer pressure and hacker pride. I'd heard that this sort of thing all my life. To see all those .mils scroll up their screen, there's a certain sort of thrill to it. I knew that I should have not been doing what I was doing, but I had good intentions overall, and I closed this hole in thousands of systems, probably tens of thousands of systems. In United States v. Smith, May 2, 2002, David L. Smith, 34, pled guilty to knowingly spreading a computer virus with the intent to cause damage. His virus, known as Melissa, infected users through email and infected the computer's Microsoft Outlook to send the same infectious email to the first 50 contacts. The Melissa virus spread quickly and caused over $80 million in damage, and this is up to date, and to date, the most costly computer outbreak. His sentence of 10 years was reduced to 20 months and a $5,000 fine when he agreed to work undercover for the FBI. He has helped to track down numerous offenders, mainly through signatures and bragging quotes they leave embedded in their malicious code. The intent to take credit is apparently greater than the intent not to get caught. Impact of hacking on business and governments. Some of the most expensive and prolific victims of hacking have been businesses. Businesses are oftentimes targeted for their customers' personal and financial data, and often are targeted by their own employees, whether disgruntled or just opportunistic. Businesses lose billions of dollars yearly as a result of hacking and other computer breaches. Many times the true cost cannot be evaluated because the effect of a security breach can linger for years after the actual attack. Companies can lose consumer confidence and in many cases are held legally responsible for any loss to their customers. The cost of recovering from an attack can spread quickly. Legal fees, investigative fees, stock performance, reputation management, customer support, etc. Companies and more recently consumers investing more and more money into preventing an attack before it actually happens. Businesses that store records of consumers' personal and financial data are especially taking extra steps to ensure the data's safety. Microsoft's online group, MSN Windows Live, requires that no single group store personal and internal information without explicit consent from an internal security group. Security reviews often occur frequently for groups that do store consumer data, and the security group performs its own personal security review by actually attempting to hack into these sites. Sites have actually been withheld from releasing to the web due to flaws found through this method. Other businesses that are more limited in technical areas employ outside security experts to assist them with their security. ScanAlert.com boasts of working with over 75,000 secure e-commerce sites, including many famous brands like Foot Locker, Restoration Hardware, and Sony. The e-commerce sites host a hacker-safe logo stating that the site is tested daily and effectively by preventing 99.9% of hacker crime. The ScanAlert disclaimer that appears far less confident. This information is intended to relative indication of the security efforts of this website and its operators. While this and any other vulnerability testing cannot and does not guarantee security. It does show that the e-commerce sites meets all payment card industry guidelines for remote web server vulnerability testing. To help protect personal identifying information from hackers, HackerSafe does not mean hacker-proof. HackerSafe certification cannot and does not protect any of your data that may be shared with other servers that are not certified HackerSafe, such as credit card processing networks or offline data storage. Nor does it protect you from other ways your data may be illegally obtained, such as non-hacker insider access to it. While ScanAlert makes reasonable efforts to assure its certification service is functioning properly, ScanAlert makes no warranty or claim of any kind whatsoever about the accuracy or usefulness of any information provided herein. By using this information, you agree that ScanAlert shall be held harmless in any event. Businesses in recent years have also had to deal with specialized and more challenging type of hacking. Social engineering in a way to defrauding a user into providing you with information not normally available to you. Whether it be a password, access code, or other piece of information necessary into hacking computer systems. Similar to phishing, social engineering relies on tricking a person or group of people in order to be successful. While not normally the tactics associated with a hacker, famous hackers like Kevin Mitnick have used it for the crime and claim it to be one of the most effective means of hacking. Digital piracy is also seen as a form of hacking. The massive rise of content available on the internet and its associated theft has changed the way many people in many industries view security. No longer do pirates only traffic in software. Movies and music and other media are also high-profile targets. This theft and uproar by content owners, music and movie industries claim to lose billions, has been so great that the United States passed a law that criminalizes production and dissemination of technology whose primary purpose is to circumvent measures taken to prevent copyright, not merely infringement on copyright itself, and heightens the penalties for copyright infringement on the internet. The law, called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, specifically targets not only the group trafficking the pirated goods, but the act of removing the protection themselves. Hackers can no longer claim an academic pursuit of knowledge in circumventing security techniques. The very act has been deemed a criminal offense. Companies, especially computer companies, also tend to be very careful about their employee base. Some of the most costly hacking crimes have been due to internal employees, sometimes ex-employees, taking advantage of their access to passwords, networks, and financial information. A UBS Payne Weber system administrator planted a virus on a company network in 2002, which deleted files and destroyed data, causing $3 million in damage. The employee was apparently dissatisfied with his salary and had put tens of thousands of dollars into stocks that would only be valuable with his company's demise. Opportunity attacks like this are hard to avoid. As the number of computer crimes have risen in the last decade, so have the consumer fears and with them a large number of security companies. In 2005, FBI Computer Crime Survey, 98% of companies surveyed used at least some form of security technology. At least 75% of the companies utilize anti-spamware software, anti-spyware software, firewalls, and antivirus software. Still, over 79% of companies surveyed were adversely affected by spyware and viruses, worms, or Trojans, all within the surveyed year. In coordination with security efforts, security engineers have long had a great deal about hacking. The best way to avoid hacking attacks is to avoid defective code, and software companies are especially criticized on this issue. Microsoft in particular has been greatly scrutinized over the number of exploitations in their software. Microsoft has made a valid attempt to limit these security holes over the years. If nothing else, has created a culture of continuously updating software to compensate for these flaws. Web development is particularly vulnerable to hacking, especially with the rise of Web 2.0. Software engineers are working on the web to be prodigious to avoid issues like cross-site scripting and SQL injection, where malicious users can exploit simple holes in websites to steal data or trick consumers. Instructions to exploit these are readily available on the internet, allowing everyday people to hack systems. Other businesses have chosen to place their trust in the very hands of hackers. While many companies express fear at trusting someone who can do so much danger, other companies take advantage of their skills in hopes of avoiding attacks by more malicious hackers. Microsoft, for instance, announced a Black Hat security conference this year that they have been working with several groups of the famous reformed hackers in attempts to provide or prevent security holes in their upcoming widely debated operating system. It seems like risky business to trust those who only years before were exploiting the very, but it seems to be paying off for Microsoft. But normal critics of Microsoft's lackadaisical attitude towards software have recently stepped forward to compliment Microsoft's attempts at securing Vista before its release, partly due to its relationship with hackers. Still, some critics think of aligning the hackers as a dangerous game and purely a marketing attempt to convince consumers of their security efforts. Microsoft and other companies hit by the effects of hacking are also joining forces with the government agencies. An FBI started an organization called InfraGard, whose mission is to prove and extend information sharing between private industry and its government, particularly the FBI, when it comes to preventing critical national infrastructures. It's basically a way of keeping communication open between the public and private sector in regards to all types of computer crime. Unstructured threats, which include insiders, recreational hacker, and institutional hacker. Structured threats, organized crime, industrial espionage and terrorists. And national security threats, which include intelligence agencies and information warriors. Another organization, the Computer Emergency Response Team, CERT, is available even to civilians and allows anyone to notify them of a cyber threat directly through a website. They are part of the Department of Homeland Security and focus more on common frauds like phishing. Aside from preventing hacking, the government has had to pass a great deal of legislation in order to effectively deal with these cyber criminals. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was passed in 1988 to limit the hacking of computer systems and cover crimes like unauthorized access to national security data, unauthorized access to data within financial institutions, transmitting code that do harm, whether financial or physical, and even covers some forms of social engineering. The law has been amended several times now, most recently with the Patriot Act, which lowered the bar for violations and increased the severity of punishments for violators. Other countries have created similar laws for themselves. Australia created the Cybercrime Act of 2001. UK created the Computer Misuse Act of 1990. Governments even joined forces to create the first international treaty regarding computer crime, called the Convention on Cybercrime. Over 40 nations have signed the treaty, including the United States in August of 2006. Hacking has become one of the most egregious crimes and has far-reaching effects. White Hat by Michael Frederick. The practice of white hat hacking, also known as ethical hacking, has been recently focused on much of the debate between computer security professionals. Many of the computer group of white hats arose from the same culture that produced black hats, or former black hats themselves. Contrasting with a person who lacks a system for personal profit or a sense of mischief, a white hat does so out of perceived ethical responsibility or a sense of curiosity, with the intended result being of an enhanced understanding of security practices and the hardening of computer systems. According to Richard Stallman, the distinction between black and white hat hackers can be characterized as hackers who turn new ideas towards destructive malicious ends versus hackers who turn new ideas toward the positive or at least informative ends. The hacker ethic, as described by Stephen Levy in his book Hackers, introduces two principles in a discussion of computer and information security. And information should be free. Mistrust authority, promote decentralization. What is crucial to understand about this passage is that its interpretation is key to understanding the nature of the hacker. A black hat may see yet freeing of arbitrary or private information as adherence to the ethic, as well as any act that destabilizes the industry. To a white hat, this ethic will imbue a personal responsibility to distinguish the types of information that should be free from those that should not. Few hackers would agree to the idea of having all personal information freely available to any for the taking. Those that do would also support the type of anarchy that tends to brew in hacker organizations. To the white hat, the decentralization of authority does not imply anarchy, but a more democratic ideal. Kevin Mitnick, Mitnick, once one of the most infamous hackers in the world, is now the owner of a security company that specializes in hacking into its clients, employing some of the techniques that Mitnick used in his previous criminal activities. While Mitnick never profited from his illegal hacking, he felt no ethical responsibilities to his victims. So it's kind of interesting, because what other criminal activity can you ethically practice? You can't be an ethical robber, you can't be an ethical murderer, so it's kind of ironic. But it's really rewarding to know that I can take my background and skills and knowledge and really help the community. H.D. Moore, founder of the open source Metasploit project, which purports to provide useful information to people who perform penetration techniques, or testing, IDS signature development, and exploit research. The tools and information on the site are provided for legal security research and testing purposes only. Critics of the project claim that the site provides the same research and tools to the would-be malicious hackers, and the disclosures and information is tantamount to aiding and abetting the enemy. History, rising out of the black hat community. In his eyes, it may be difficult to discern the difference between white and black hat hacking. To a system administrator on the inside of a corporate firewall, the motivations or ethical code of the person attacking their system may be irrelevant. Yet it is the ethical code that typically distinguishes the other two types. Whereas black hats are often seen as having dubious or non-existent ethical values, white hats define themselves by adherence to the hacker ethic, and specifically using their skills to help people and companies defend themselves against the black hats. Although, as noted in the case of Max Butler, an ethical accounting system may still lead a hacker to do destructive things in the name of security. Hackers, as humans, are enormously complex creatures. It would be facile to assume the hackers strictly adhere to the ethical code at all times. But in defining what a white hat is, a good definition could be one who hacks under a set of ethical guidelines and does for the good of individuals and society. This definition could imply that many common white hats do not deserve the title, as they may be primarily motivated by earning a living at their jobs. While there is a current trend to pigeonhole a hacker in either white or black hat camp, this was not always the case. Many hackers consider themselves gray hats, implying that the label is less important than the hacking. Perhaps most hackers belong in this category, since there are a few unambiguously good or bad people, and a good person may commit harmful acts. Still, in general, labels are useful. Reformation of former black hats. As the Kevin Mitnick case, there are many former black hat hackers who are now employed in the computer security industry. While it may be difficult to assume an ethical change in the hacker, since they are being compensated and legitimized by these companies, it no doubt reflects a change in the intended outcome of their actions. Hacker literature. Stephen Levy's book, Hackers, first codified the hacker ethic. As noted earlier, there are key principles that relate to the computer security: freedom of information and a mistrust of authority. Depending on the interpretation of these principles can lead hackers to define themselves as white or black hat, or variations of gray in between. To a typical white hat, freedom of information implies a number of things. Public disclosure of the vulnerabilities. It does not interpreted to mean that all information, including private and personal information, should be free. When the ethic was divided, few people had large amounts of personal data available online, and many of the core ideas of personal computing were impractical or impossible. There are also a number of documents referred to as the Hacking Manifesto. The first such document was written by Lloyd Blankenship under the stream moniker The Mentor, and was published in Frack in 1986 under the title The Conscience of a Hacker. While it's fairly dark and anarchic overtones, it inspired an ethical basis for hacking in many readers, even appearing in the movies Hackers. It is important to note again that this literature may have been inspired just as many, if not more, black hats, and it cannot be regarded as strictly beneficial in nature. Other influential documents show a trend towards further disorder. Another document, simply titled Manifest, elaborates on the themes of anarchy and alienation. To be sure, many may find in these documents the inspiration to hack for the sake of hacking, which can easily lead to or be construed as black hat. There are many hacking-related periodicals such as Frack and 2600. While the information may often pertain to explicitly black hat activities, there are also altruistic motives behind some of the writing. A white hat may be surely familiar with the literature to remain informed on hacking-related documents, and they may even contribute to increase the awareness of exploits and other information that should be free. Popular culture. Images of white hat hackers may be found in many movies and books. In Hollywood, the main characters in the movie The Matrix started out as simply computer hackers who end up fighting for the fate of human civilization. Other movies include Hackers and Sneakers. Impact. Society. In 2002, a group of hackers known as EL8 began a campaign of cyber terror against known white hat hackers called Project Mayhem, which has the purported goal of causing worldwide physical destruction to the security industry infrastructure. This group sees the success of ethical hacking as a personal affront to their own ideals and as a general corruption of the hacker ethic. From the new Hacking Manifesto by EL8 member Crazy Consolo. I am a hacker. Don't try to understand me. You lost all hope of that when you crossed the line. You failed to see the lies and utter simplicity behind the computer security industry. Once you may have shared my ideals. You fail to see the fact that security is a maintenance job. You've given up hope for something better. You fail to see yourselves as worthless, fueling an industry whose cumulative result is nothing. I don't hate you. I don't really care about you. If you try to stop me, you will fail, because I do this out of love. You do it for money. This sense of betrayal is spread throughout the Project Mayhem site and literature. Whether the complaint is legitimate and ethical hackers are more often promoting themselves and their services, an overall perception of the material is one of personal effrontery, not one based in ideology. Security. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, jobs for computer security professionals are rising, much faster than average, the highest level that the Bureau measures. A growing job market would lead one to conjecture that more hackers will see this as a potential career path. From an economic perspective, there may be more to gain via a legitimate paycheck than that which arises from whatever satisfying malicious or personal curiosity or gaining infamy in the black hat community. The other side of the issue is that in a society increasingly focused on security, there may be more to gain as that side of a black hat. One of the more controversial aspects of ethical hacking is the concept of disclosure. Software vendors would greatly prefer to have the knowledge of potential bugs or possible exploits before it reaches the public. For the vendor, it gives them an opportunity to patch the problem before it is exploited in the wild. But many hackers in the community feel that the full public disclosure is the only method to ensure that vendors will act upon the discovery of these exploits and release patches for all customers. The vendor counter that this allows malicious software to be created as the patches are being developed. H.D. Moore elaborates the concept of full disclosure thusly. Partial disclosure never works. You just end up catering to special groups that you deem trustworthy enough to have access. Although somewhat controversial, the hiring of former black hats as security professionals is seen as a necessary evil, as the hackers possess the skills and mindset of the people that they wish to employ to be defended against. There is a debate over the efficacy of former black hats in the security role. While they may possess skills and information important to the attack of systems, it is not clear whether those same skills are critical in the defense of the same systems. Said Paul Ducklin, Chief Technical Officer at Sophos, I do not know why people think that you can trot out 10 or 20 or 100 viruses. You would be great at actually producing some antivirus technology that can deal with 200,000 different bits of malware. Conclusion by everyone. From lofty beginnings as expert programmers and curious intellectuals, the hacker mentality evolved over time a multifarious worldview. Hacking is seen in programming and in the legal, semi-legal, and illegal activities of many white, gray, and black hat hackers. All seem to adhere to the different aspects of the hacker ethic. A hacker is always someone who pushes the bounds of technology. Generally, they have been affiliated with the open source movement and have been known to put some of their work in the public domain. As computing has evolved, we have seen it move away from innovations in hardware and onto software, and now onto the internet. Based on history, we see that newer fields of computing are generally the places where hackers have the largest impact. This would lead to the conclusion that the impact of hackers will be most felt in the developments to do with the internet in the short term. And in the medium term, it seemed that inevitable that other newer fields of computing would attract the interest of hackers. There is already significant buzz surrounding sensor networks and moats, so it would not be surprising to see a large amount of innovation in these areas. In the security realm, we see more and more activity, spyware, viruses, spam. But as the job number of malicious black hats increase, we can expect a corresponding increase of security jobs and white hats. We expect more and more high-profile attacks on public targets and tighter controls via the legislature. The future of the word hacker is unlikely to be varied as its past. Since the word has entered the mainstream, and many members of the hacker community are willing to let the eternal hacker versus cracker flame or die, we can predict that black hat will be its primary definition as we move on to the future. This prediction, of course, makes the tenuous assumption that no new definition is developed. Given the current definition is disseminated with such great speed and over the violent objections of the original hacker community, it is certainly likely that the endorsement of the journalism community and wider English-speaking world that this nascent definition of hacker may usurp the older one. And then the references. Oh wow, I didn't expect that to be that long, but I found it pretty interesting going over the history of hacking, and different definitions. So thanks a lot for joining me. I'm going to go drink some water or something. Until next time.